Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Jarrell Miller has responded to Eddie Hearn's comments of him being a stone-cold cheat, calling Eddie Hearn a fraud. So Miller had been hoping to sign with Hearn, but he eventually went on to sign with Top Rank. That is now official. But Eddie Hearn, he's spoken to the media, and I'll come to that in a second, some comments to boxingscene.com, and Miller has not liked them. And what I'll do is I'll get to Hearn's comments first, and then the statement from Miller, which obviously you can see here. Here's a picture of him saying Hearn is a fraud. But Hearn, talking to Boxing Scene, says, "I wish him all the best. He was desperate to sign with us. I just couldn't do it. It didn't feel right. I know I can be hypocritical at times, but this guy failed 3 drug tests for 3 different supplements. Or not even supplements. He injected in his ass. You know, stone cold cheating. And there was no ban. But it's over, it's done. I wish him all the best. You know, I could always shake his hand and smile at him, but I felt like he let me down, and he let boxing down, and he tried to cheat in a fight against Anthony Joshua, who is my friend and client. And I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. As much as there was some great fighters out there for him, the Joshua fight, the Dillian Whyte fight, it didn't sit right to basically encourage this. And that's what they've done by giving him a new contract, a big contract, coming off the back of failed tests for 3 substances. But line on the sand, I wish Big Baby Miller all the best. Respect to him. God bless. Good night. We'll see you soon." So obviously the backstory, Miller was meant to fight Joshua in 2019, but he popped dirty for 3 different substances, one called GW1516, EPO, and also HGH, human growth hormone. And Miller, he was given 6 months out of the WBA's rankings. So I don't know if you'd really call it a ban, because it's not really. He was just dropped from the rankings for 6 months. So in terms of Miller, so he's responded here. Obviously, you can see the picture here saying fraud. Further down, he says, "My grandmother also told us, 1, listen first before you speak. Over the past few months, I have remained quiet, preparing for my re-entry into the ring. However, the comments by Eddie Hearn are disrespectful and troublesome, to say the least. I am not the scapegoat. Many are afraid of those who speak the truth, and I will continue to do just that. Yes, I made a mistake. I've admitted it, and my team and I moved past it. Thank you, DAZN, for the opportunities. My return to the ring very soon will speak for itself." And that's Jarrell Miller's statement on Instagram, calling Eddie Hearn a fraud, and that Hearn's comments are disrespectful and troublesome, to say the least. And actually, I'll come to some comments later from on Twitter from Adam Abramowitz, who's taken a pot shot at Eddie Hearn. But first, let's get back to these comments by Eddie Hearn and also Jarrell Miller. And first I want to say, though, that had Eddie Hearn actually signed Jarrell Miller, I'm sure he would have said everyone's entitled to a second chance. The fact that he hasn't signed Miller opens him up to basically saying anything. And he probably knows that the comments that he made, which is basically saying, I couldn't do it, that it plays well with people who follow him and also Matchroom and have a stake in the fighters at Matchroom. But just to throw in here, you know, it was a bit lovey-dovey just a couple of months ago. So this is from September. This is Behind the Gloves interview. It was at Madison Square Garden. I can't remember which fight it was, but Miller was there. And you may recall at the same event, Miller actually was getting physical with a heckler. But Miller here and Hearn on the left, they were talking about that they still had love for each other. And Jarrell Miller was cozying up to Hearn saying, I want to come home. So Hearn is clearly right when he says that Miller was desperate to sign with him. But obviously it never happened. He went to Top Rank. We don't know the terms of the deal, but it's a multi-year deal from reports or from the information that's come out from Top Rank. But the terms of it, yeah, it's a little bit under the wraps at the moment. But yeah, had they actually signed here, I'm sure Hearn would have taken a different tune here. But he said, yeah, Miller's a stone cold cheat and he didn't want to sign him. He just couldn't do it. And Miller, with his comments, well, I mean, he doesn't really sort of pot shot Hearn too much. He says it's disrespectful and troublesome. But But what was Miller actually expecting of people when they're commenting on his previous situation? No one's going to be going into bat for him and saying, yeah, it was a good thing. Well, at least you owned up. And because initially he didn't. He said he would be vindicated. And then ultimately he ended up coming out a few days after that when the third test came out. And he didn't really apologise. What he actually did was just said he's made some mistakes. So he keeps saying he's made mistakes, but he didn't really sort of say sorry to fans in any meaningful way. At least that's how I perceived it. But he's calling Eddie Hearn a fraud here, a guy who actually had him on a deal at DAZN where he was able to fight the likes of Thomas Adamek and Bogdan Dinu for very good money and very little risk. And he obviously got the fight with Anthony Joshua and messed that up through his own stupidity. So I can sort of see why Miller is a little bit sort of peeved off that Hearn is talking about this, but that's just going to continue to happen probably throughout the rest of Jarrell Miller's career. It's happened, he did actually inject the needle. He had to have, he's tried to pass it off as a medical procedure on his elbow. But people that I've spoken to who work with performance-enhancing drugs in that area, the science of it, have told me that's laughable. So he was injecting human growth hormone and also EPO. And in other sports, people have got long bans for using EPO, a couple of years in MMA and that sort of stuff. So the whole 6 months out of the rankings, he was just dropped from the WBA. He was also dropped from the WBO. It's not really a ban, is it? And given the severity of his drug misuse, clearly Jarrell Miller has sort of dodged the bullet here and basically sort of, as he's called it, a timeout. That's what he's described as those 6 months out of the ring. And then he's sort of fallen into a top-ranked deal. So he should actually count his lucky stars. And he's actually done quite well for himself. But let's face it, Hearn and Miller, had they actually come to some sort of agreement, had Hearn signed him, he would have been talking about second chances. But also, they could potentially still work together in the future. Remembering, after the whole Joshua and Miller sort of thing, because Miller's drug tests, Hearn never shut the door on him. He wouldn't say never with Jarrell Miller, and he sort of at the time said, down the road there could be an opportunity to work together. This industry is so small, blah, 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 that sort of stuff. And I could still see that happening. So they might be sort of bickering online and throwing a few barbs at each other right now. But if there's a chance to make money, I'm sure they could actually work together and all would be forgiven. And the fact that, just a couple of months ago they were saying they had, love for each other, and look at the gays here, both of them looking at each other. I could see them working together in the future if it actually came to pass. There was an opportunity to do so for both of them to make money. But Adam Abramowitz on Twitter, so he is a reporter, he's actually stated, "Oh, love Eddie, but how many failed drug testers were on the card in Saudi Arabia? White, Povetkin, Wok, Molina. Am I missing anyone? No virgins in this." And obviously he's referring to the Boxing Scene article. And there was actually another tweet from Eddie Hearn. So he says, I believe all those served a ban. There was another tweet talking about, White cleared his UCAD situation, but clearly White had actually served a ban a number of years ago for when he failed a test for a substance being Inject 3D, which was a pre-workout supplement. So he's sort of calling Eddie Hearn on you won't, sign Miller, but then you're working with all these other former drug cheats, White, Povetkin, Wok, Molina, etc. And Adam Abramowitz, in response to Eddie Hearn, says, everyone uses drug cheats on their cards. It's the reality in the industry. I don't think one party is better than the other on this. If you do, so be it. And he says, yep, I just couldn't work with him in that kind of way. That's all. So I think the situation, never say never, because Eddie Hearn hasn't completely shut the door, and neither did he shut the door in that article. He just said he couldn't work with them now, couldn't sign with them now. And it is a never say never industry, boxing, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, Miller not happy, calling Eddie Hearn a fraud. Hearn saying he couldn't work with a stone-cold drug cheat. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.